Hey home group pastors, welcome to this training video. Before I get into the His Story series and this session 2, I want to take care of just a little bit of business. If you were in church last Sunday, Dave gave an announcement about Remind, a way for us to communicate with the church. We really need your help in pushing this to the body. So if you would take a look at the community update or email the office, check your Lake Valley headlines. It's important that we get information out. Very often we get criticized for communication being poor. I'm not going to argue with that, but it is a two-way street, and we need you to help us get them to participate. So if they'll text to number 81010 instead of a phone number, text 81010, and if they'll just type in @LVFamily, @LVFamily, that's the @ LVFamily, they'll get signed up. It's going to ask them for their name. Just send their name back first and last, and then we'll have a record of who we're communicating with. We really want to build this. There are a lot of subgroups specific to ministries that this will allow us to also communicate with, but it's only going to work if y'all play with us. So we've hit the ball over the net. We need y'all to hit it back to us. Otherwise, this is a very boring game of tennis. All right, secondly, I am really excited about an administrative thing we're doing, and that is that Dave Miner is going to come on board full-time in September, just a week or so away. And one of his jobs is to help us administer home groups. So what we're creating is, for lack of a better term, a call schedule so that we get touch base with the home group pastor, at least every 5 months. And we have higher goals than that, but I don't want to overpromise. And some of the things we want to talk about is how can we support you and your apprentice couple, if that's the case. How can we support you as husband and wife if you're a married couple leading? How can we help you? Also, we're going to be looking for leadership. We have groups that are exploding, and we want to help you, help us learn how to identify leaders that we can have launch new groups. We have launched some new groups. Some of those are already filling up. So all signs our home groups are on a really good tack, but we don't want to back up. We want to lean into that. So Dave will be administering it as far as setting up the schedules. Lamar will be contacting you as well as me from time to time about what needs to happen. It's a way for you to communicate to us if for example, what we're doing right now, is it working or is it not? How can we support you? So really excited about that opportunity. Please let us know how that's helping you. Please prioritize those times with Lamar or I so that we can get that feedback from you. Related to that is that we do have a lot of groups that are large. If your group is 16 or larger, you may not be to the point you need to multiply immediately, but you can see it from where you are. Groups that get to be 16 and larger begin to lose some intimacy. The ideal number for a small group is 12, and many of our groups have gotten larger than that. So we're going to be administering this in a way that we can try to help you identify leaders, to help us identify leaders, and let's launch some new groups so that we're effective in this way of getting at one of our core values, which is community. All right. So I think that's all the business I need to take care of. If you've got a community update, you've got the questions for session 2. Those are also available in the Lake Valley headlines. If you need them in another format, you can email the church. For me personally, when I get my Lake Valley headlines, I upload it to my iPad. So anytime I go to home group, I've got it right there. If you need help in learning how to do that, just call the office, and we'll try to help you figure out how to do that. But you can always revert to good old paper. So we're in session 2. Session 2 covers from chapters 4 to 8. And because of some scheduling conflicts, we reverse the order in the preaching schedule. And so in your home group sessions, we've got it broken into 2 parts. You can do it by chapter order. You can go to 4 first, which is the second half. And I think that's what I'm going to do this morning as I talk through this little tutorial. So we'll start in the second half of session 2 We're in chapters 4 through 7. This will be from a sermon that Drew has preached on the ark. And I'll just go question by question. What did you learn about our God from the ark story? Then he has a quote, God has no hands but our hands. What's right with that slogan and what's wrong with that slogan in light of the ark story? Drew hasn't preached this sermon yet, but I think where he's going with this is that we often talk about when we're engaging community that God has no feet, He has no hands but ours, and it's right in the sense that God needs us to come alongside us. He wants us to come alongside Him to engage the community. Sometimes we can oversell that though, and the impression can be that God is powerless. What we learn from the ark story is God is all powerful. I said in the last Sunday sermon, He's sovereign. When God needs and wants to act, He doesn't need us. He can do it strictly on His own. The beauty of God, though, is that He chooses to give us some choices, and He chooses to use us. It's almost like God has got one hand tied behind His back, maybe two hands tied behind His back, and He's going to say, look at how powerful I am. I can use these guys to engage a community. So there's a real truth in that statement, but don't let that, and what you want to push with your group is help them understand that God is not limited to just what we do. The second question is, what does the ark story tell about what kind of king God would have been? It's related to that first question in that God is powerful. And as we read this ark story, nations feared God. They feared this representation of God. The ark contained the covenant of God. It represented God's agreement with His people. It represented the presence of God, the Spirit of God, the power of God. And just with that symbol alone, nations trembled. People treasured. In fact, the Philistines stole it so that they could get the power of God. God would have been a powerful king. If they had walked in faith and they had honored God's command about what a king would even look like, God would have been powerful in their presence. They chose something else. That's the kind of God we would have. Third question, despite seeing God's power in the flood, the Exodus, and in the account of the ark, Israel still chose their own way, a human king. Does this ring true in your life? And how can we safeguard ourselves? Even as I read that question, I think about my own life and how often God gives me clear instructions or He gives me clear directives. And even though I know how powerful God is, I choose my own way far too often. I want you, as in your home groups, really camp on this question. Don't let them skirt this. Don't let them talk about, I know a guy that has this problem. This is a real opportunity for them to grow, to go introspective and think very seriously about how often we all, and how often I just hit the mic, sorry guys, how often I seek my own way, the kingdom of man. I seek to bypass the power of God. We all struggle with that. How can we safeguard that? Let them wrestle with that a little bit. I would encourage you to maybe take them down the path of the spiritual disciplines, reading the Scripture, prayer, memorizing Scripture, spending time alone listening to God. It's when we're alone with God and we have no distractions and we can't hide from His power that we see it the most. So those are some options. Talk about the spiritual disciplines. Talk about community, that we speak truth and life into one another. We're less apt to wander after our own gods when we have someone else. As Scripture says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Community in and of itself is one way for us to safeguard. There are a lot of ways. In fact, the 4 strategies of Lake Valley, gathering, growing, serving, and sending, they're all ways to get at this idea of faith and growing in maturity and full abandonment and trust to God. All right, so now let's go to chapter 8. it is so closely related. It's almost going to be like the same session, same concepts. Question 1 is, Samuel was a godly prophet and judge over Israel. Why did the people insist that they wanted a king? You know, I'd go back and pick out some of those verses in chapter 8. Verses where, for one, their culture was frayed. It was kind of coming apart, and they were a little confused about how do we hold how do we hold ourselves together, the people of God? How do we maintain order in unity? Samuel's sons, Eli's sons, they had all become wicked. But they chose a solution, and they insisted on a king because that was what all the other nations were doing. And as I taught last Sunday, it's not that they chose a king that was such a great atrocity. The problem was why they chose a king and what they hoped choosing a king would accomplish. See, I believe if they had actually followed the system of the judges and the priests and the prophets, this organic, loose structure, I think they would have survived as a nation, unified around a holy God. They wouldn't even required a human king. They chose him because they wanted their own way. Question 2 in that first section, God said their request was a rejection of him as king, yet he granted their request and told Samuel to anoint a king. Why? Now that is a deep question. That's the whole question of, does God make us serve him, or why does God even give us some free will? And I touched on it Sunday that God is sovereign in the sense that he maintains a territory, an empire. But within that empire, as with any king, unless he's completely tyrannical, we have choices within the borders of his sovereignty. And I would let your people wrestle with that. Why would a God who could demand service allow us to wander at times? Don't answer that too quick. And we're not actually looking for a specific answer. What we're wrestling with is the heart issue of themselves. Why do they themselves tend to wander? My personal opinion is you only know that someone really loves you if you give them the option of not loving you. My grandfather used to say, if you love someone, let them go. And if they come back, they're yours. And if they don't, they were never yours in the first place. Those are pretty wise words. And I think in some ways they reflect why God would allow them to choose a king other than him. It's only when we serve, not out of duty, but out of desire, that we truly have relationship. God's a holy God. He's a just God. He's a gentleman. And in that respect, I think that's how we know that we love him, and we know that he knows that we're his followers, is that we choose him as our king. I hope this is a great discussion. I hope you don't go down a path. Remember, go down a path of trying to get just the right answer. Remember, these are discussion questions. There may be some differing opinions in the room. Don't feel the pressure to get everybody exactly filling in the blank the same way. What you want them to do is wrestle with these questions a little bit. Wrestle with the solution. We're not going for one specific answer. We're wanting to start a conversation. So good luck with this. I hope this is helpful. Look forward to seeing you soon. We'll see you Sunday. Bye.